I think if people are here joining us, just welcoming you to our session. People are welcome to introduce themselves in the chat as we get started. Welcome, everyone. Oh, hello, Casey from Rachel's Network. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Thank you.
Awesome. I see the numbers climbing, but I'll do the intro and then we can get into the wonderful content that we've got today. Greetings, everyone. My name is Ryan Craning. I use they, them, and he, him pronouns. I am the founder of Events by Lady K, and we are proud to be supporting the WFN team today on tech and production things. So excited for everyone to be joining the conference, being in community together, even virtually from around the world, and especially excited for all of the content and conversations that are happening today. So you are in gender and racial equity and feminist climate solutions, and are so excited for this conversation today. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Osprey. Take it away. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Brian. So welcome everyone to our session, Gender and Racial Equity and Feminist Climate Solutions. My name is Osprey Orielle, and I'm the Executive Director of the Women's Earth and Climate Action Network, or WECAN. And I'm really honored to be here with you all today, and thank you for joining us, and you're welcome to introduce yourself in the chat if you'd like. I'm on Coast Miwok lands in the San Francisco Bay Area in California, and I want to introduce our really outstanding group of leaders who are presenting on the panel today, and they're all part of the WECAN team. First, we have Kari Ames, who you can't see, but she is right here listening in on the phone and will be speaking through our phone connection here. She is an Indigenous Tlingit woman. She's a traditional knowledge keeper and WECAN representative in the Tongass Rainforest in Alaska. She's on a remote island and their internet has gone down. So we do work with communities that live in many different situations. So we're really honored to have her here with us. Also, Neema Namadamu, she's the founder of Sofeco, and she is the WECAN coordinator in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And we have Helena Gualinga. She's an Indigenous Quechua woman. Helena is a climate youth activist and WECAN young woman leader from Sariaco in the Ecuadorian Amazon rainforest. And I'm just really honored to have these women here today with us. I'm going to begin our session with a systemic overview. If we could go ahead and show the first slide. The next one. So we are at a choice point for humanity. The most recent intergovernmental panel on climate change report confirms that we already knew to be true, that with no significant action, the climate crisis will continue to escalate quickly. Every day we can see for ourselves forest fires burning all over the world, massive flooding, extreme droughts, people losing their livelihoods and lives. We are in a climate emergency. So to truly address the root causes, as well as the scope and scale of the climate crisis, we really need policy projects and campaigns that are systemic across all sectors of society, strong in feminist principles, and strive to combat historical oppressions. The climate crisis has emerged from interlocking systems of capitalism, resource extraction, racism, colonialism, and patriarchy. So to confront this crisis, we need to have coherence across policy sectors. And when we analyze root causes, it's clear that women experience the climate crisis with disproportionate severity precisely because their basic rights continue to be denied in varying forms and intensities across the world. Enforced gender inequality reduces women's physical and economic mobility, voice, access to power, and so much more, making them very vulnerable to mounting environmental stresses. And Indigenous women, Black and Brown women, women from low-income communities, and women from the Global South bear an even heavier burden because of racial and economic injustices. That said, against all odds and against great challenges, what inspires me so deeply is that women, feminists, and gender diverse people are demonstrating every day that they have unique and essential solutions and skills to offer at this turning point in history. And in fact, we can't succeed without their efforts. Study after study shows that women are central to climate and environmental solutions, from forest protection to food security, from water management to climate policies, from fossil fuel resistance efforts to seed saving. Women are leading the way. Next slide. So here are some of the projects, campaigns, and program areas we are working in. And you can just take a look at that. Women for Forest, feminist care economies, women in food sovereignty, feminist advocacy. Next slide. And we have seen that it is really important to implement comprehensive strategies to push forward feminist climate solutions. So we organize in the streets. Next. This is in Ecuador. Next. This is at the UN climate talks. Next. Next. Standing for murdered and missing Indigenous women related to fossil fuel extraction. Next. We have found that it's also important to implement comprehensive strategies. So we advocate in the halls of power, bringing diverse women's voices to be heard by elected leaders. So this was an event that we held as a briefing at the United States Capitol with many congressional leaders for feminist climate policies. Next. Next. Meeting with then Senator Deb Haaland. Next. Next. We also are bringing delegations of frontline leaders to meet with financial institutions to make our demands clear for the protection of our communities, from fossil fuel extraction to deforestation, both of which are key to climate crises. So it's been really powerful having these Indigenous delegations directly to talk to, as an example, banks or BlackRock directly about what's happening in their communities, to put forward different policies that respect Indigenous rights and care for forests and care for water and care for the local needs of communities. So it's really important work that we can have these delegations. Next. Next. At Weekend, we also noted that there was a serious gap in analysis of the specific racial and gendered impacts concerning the fossil fuel industry. So we recently completed an in-depth report about this vital intersection. And our research is part of a broader campaign to organize with frontline women to meet with financial institutions, as I was just saying, with banks or large asset managers who are financing fossil fuels, for having them to have this direct engagement to talk about what is happening in their communities, the harm experienced in their bodies and the communities and the land. And we see how women of color and Indigenous women experience disproportionate impacts of fossil fuel-derived pollution through their bodies, including higher risks of cancer and numerous issues for mothers and their unborn babies. Or in the case of Indigenous women along Line 3 pipeline construction in Minnesota, there are man camps putting at risk the safety of Indigenous women and girls. As an example, already this year, Line 3 pipeline workers in Minnesota were arrested and charged with human trafficking, and this was in association with the fossil fuel pipeline. Next. We bring delegations to the annual United Nations climate talks, so grassroots and frontline women can speak directly for themselves about what their needs are and what they need to happen in their community. So decisions about the climate talks don't happen without representation of the people that are directly being impacted by the climate crisis. Next. These are just different images of our events at the UN climate talks. Next. Next. In the midst of policy work, it's also important to stay grounded at home, as with our Indigenous-led food sovereignty program in the Gulf South, as we work with communities to build food and medicine security for the years ahead. So next, one more on that. These are just some of the amazing Indigenous women who are leading this effort. for the Weekend Indigenous food sovereignty programs. And we really see that as the years ahead, we need to both, work to stop the harms from happening, but also build community efforts for people to be able to have a seventh generation understanding of how to care for their communities around food and water security as we navigate the COVID-19 pandemic, but also for more and more climate impacts that are coming. Next. Some more of our marches. Next. Thank you so much. And there's information about how to see our work on our website. So it's just to give you an overview of why the systemic approach and analysis is so important that we bring to the halls of power, to the streets, and to communities. So that's the final slide. And with that, I want to introduce Kari Ames, who I mentioned is joining us by phone. And before she talks, I'm really honored to show this short video of the work that we've been doing with Kari Ames and a group of amazing Indigenous women from the Tongass rainforest. It's called Tlingit Women Advocate During Historic Validation to Protect the Tongass Rainforest. So please go ahead, Ryan, if you could show the first video. Thank you.
We fought real hard for what became the roadless rule for Alaska in 2001. Now they want to roll it back and weaken it. They again haven't talked to us. We have come here to speak with those on Capitol Hill to ask that we be looked at as human beings, not as relics that have been put into the museum. We need to be heard. It's important that we work towards making this roadless rule a law, so that it cannot be tampered with at the whim of one election to the next.
We are not here just for us. We are here for Alaska and Southeast Alaska, and it is about 90% say that they are for the roadless rule. It is working. We are seeing stuff coming back. It's like a dominoes effect. You take these trees away, everything else is gonna fall. Not just the animals, not just the plants, but the people. The roadless rule is making a difference, but we need to keep it there, otherwise it's gonna be gone.
We want our Tongass forest to be protected. It's one of the last largest national forests in the world, and it provides 8% of carbon for the rest of the people in the world. It's not just us that we're worried about, it's climate change. And now they want to take a bunch of steps backwards. We want you to stand with us and help represent us, because we as a culture are not being represented by our senators in Alaska. They have a different vision, and it doesn't consider 90% of people that live up there. The survival of our culture right now is dependent on this roadless rule.
We're a part of that ecosystem, and it's finally coming back to what it once was, and it's really important that it stays because it's a way of life. If this happens, it brings devastation, and it's like another genocide. It just brings nothing but harm for the ecosystem and the people and the fish. We rely on all of it, and the Forest Service is going to try and log the old growth, which is what we're fighting against. We need the roadless rule coded in the law.
It's one of the most important forests in the world, but also here in the United States in terms of carbon sequestration. It makes no sense with the IPCC report that's come out giving us 10 to 12 years to be destroying this forest that is most important for Indigenous people and all the cultural survival that they are dependent upon. That's the most important thing, but also to think about it in terms of our nation and the entire climate change issue globally, that it's a really important forest.
We are connected to the land in a way that people do not understand because they are not in it all the time. And this is our medicine. It recharges us. People that live in the city, they have lost that connection. They're in this concrete jungle. Why do we seek out going camping? Why do we seek out going hiking? Because it recharges you. It makes you feel better. And that's because we are connected to this land and that we need to stand up for it. What are we gonna leave our children? Rocks. That's what it's gonna be. We can't eat rocks.
Our voices have to be as important as any industries, if not more important, because the industries come in. We live there, and we have to live with the impacts. And we haven't even recovered from the clear cuts of the late last century. And the 2001 roadless rule has to be allowed to work. And it is working well for us now.
Look at these trees, not just as trees, not just as pulp or paper or a pencil or money. Think of us, the people that are there, all the animals that are there. There was a vote last year to exempt the state of Alaska from the roadless rule, putting the Tongass at risk, but luckily they failed. There will likely be other votes this year, and we want you guys to stand strong and help our voices be heard and be amplified. And I feel like you guys can help us do that and help stand behind us and with us and stand up for the Tongass National Forest.
So that is the background. And here you're hearing directly from the rainforest of the Tongass through voice. Kari Ames. Go ahead, Kari. And
I told you that my Tlingit name is Dia. I am a Tlingit woman, and I am a Koho woman of the Koho clan. And I'm talking to you from my homeland, Ha'ani, Southeast Alaska. And I am here to be the voices of not only the Indigenous people, but of Alaskans in general. They were not listening to us when there was a vote, and 90% of Alaskans wanted it to stay, and they weren't listening to that. They were pushing other agendas really fast, so that way we had no response. They were funding the logging industry and other people. They were giving them money to do their analysis and researches. Well, where was the money for our analysis and research for our government and entities that we have? And so right there you could see that it was not about us. It was about industry. And so we are done being compromised. We have been compromised to death. There is a Nilka and an Angska, and those are supposed to be our protections. But with backdoors always happening, it's very hard when you have other entities coming in. Now, we did win a little bit. You know, we got the roadless rule reinstated, but it can still be messed with by anyone who comes into power, as we did see that with Trump, where he took it away. So our next fight is to codify it into law, because we are done being compromised, and we are done being overlooked and our voices silenced, because when they force these things very fast, they don't give us an option to even have our voices heard, and that is not right. For it is our land, and they have not sought permission from the right people, from our Hitsati, our head houseman, from our Nakla, our house mother. And each clan has a defined territory, and they know this land intimately. And I feel like our ancestors were the first scientists. They knew much more about this land, but yet they said that they were savages. We were not savages. We did not have any locked doors. There was no one who was poor. Anyone who was without, we gladly gave. And this is our way. This is our way of life. Is Tlingit means the people, and it is always about the people. And when our people in higher powers are trying to say that it's for Alaskan jobs, it is not for the jobs. The logging industry is less than 1%. Now, when the logging camps come into our villages, Huna, Chichagof Island is just a little bit smaller than Puerto Rico, so it is a good-sized island. Now, there were 5 different logging camps around our town, our hometown, and They're not a part of our town. They're out in their own camps. They have their own stores. They get their mail out there. So they're really not a part of our community. And these people come from elsewhere to work. And we get the lower end jobs and the dangerous jobs. So it's really not about us. And Alaska has the highest rate of missing and murdered Indigenous women. So it is also about that. Now, Huna has a population of around 800. And when those 5 logging camps were around our town, we only have a bar and a restaurant that also serves alcohol. And for a town of 800, in that 1 year with those 5 logging camps around us, they sold over $1 million of alcohol. So you can imagine what comes along with that. So we are part of the broken generations, not only from these boarding schools that our grandparents got taken away to, but then you have these logging camps that are taken away even more. Now with this pandemic, we are seeing that we need this forest even more because sometimes the shelves are empty in our store, like it's wintertime, and it's not wintertime, and it's very concerning because, you know, it's a salmon forest. This is where the salmon come from. We are the people of the salmon and the forest, and we have taken care of both of them. And the salmon industry is $1 million, billion-dollar industry, and we are feeding the world. But we cannot feed the world if we do not protect where these salmon are laying their eggs and they are coming from. And, you know, it's a balance. Our ego says that we are above nature, but we are not. We are one with nature. We are in a circle together, and we realize this balance. And we are just done being compromised, and we need help for our voices to be heard because there's a lot of ways we're being silenced. And we are trying to do food sovereignty. So we're trying to protect our food because if we can protect our food, we can protect everything else. Because in what way is it okay to mess with our food? You know, we rely on this food. The food at the store is way too expensive. But now we are seeing our food being affected where rivers are drying up when the seasons are too dry, where some rivers are too warm and the fish are full of worms. There are areas where berries aren't coming back because it's too warm. And I would just like to say thank you for your time and hearing my voice. And please think about the Tlingit, the Haida, and the Tsimshian of the people who live here and who it is directly affecting. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you so much, Kari, for joining us. I really appreciate that. And we send you our love and care for your community at this time. And now I'd like to introduce Neema Namadamu, and we have a short video to introduce her comments about her community. If we could show Seeding the Future, Women Protecting Forests, Climate, and Communities. Thank you.
When I come back here after 25 years, I was shocked. When I was a little girl, the forest was here. And when I was here, I see no more trees. Idea was how again people can bring life back.
As the climate crisis increases, scientists are telling us that one of the most important things that we can do is to protect forests and biodiversity. The Congo Basin is one of the largest and most important forests of the world, only second to the Amazon in terms of size. And there we are reforesting damaged lands that due to extractive industries, agricultural business, have been completely turned into deserts.
We have now 500 women. They are planting those trees. And when you planting trees, you are owner of those trees and you are owner on the land. That is not usual on our culture. Women to have some propriety, some ownership. That gives us really confidence.
Ibi byose nijoro biteye kandi nije uzubibagarira iri ni ishyamba ryanje.
75% of the trees are going to rewilding the forest. Some of them now are 20 feet tall, and we're quickly seeing the forest begin to regenerate. And 25% are for human use, so that we can ensure that we're protecting the 1.6 million acres of old growth forest. This is where their food comes from, where their medicines come from, where the things they need for their homes come from, their pharmacy.
ibiti akamaro ko kubitera icyo bimarira n'icyo mbitegeyemo cyane ni ukugira ngo tuzongere tubone imvura muri iki gihugu cyacu. Ibiti byarashize, turifuza yuko ibino biti za weekend zokomeza tukongera tukagarura amashamba.
Women, they are now protecting environment with trees. Women of Itombwe Forest, natural forest from DRC, we are trying to protect our environment.
We're now protecting 1.6 million acres of old growth forest over the years as we reforest in the Congo Basin.
Kuko byamariye njewe ku giti cyanje bimpesha ihewa nziza muri iki gihugu cyacu.
During the COVID-19 pandemic, there was a real need to develop more food sovereignty and food security. So now not only in the nurseries that we have are we planting sapling trees, but also lots of food for the local communities.
Vegetables we did really help so much. People to have vegetables to fight with malnutrition.
And the women are just so proud to not only be planting trees and healing their damaged homelands, but also protecting this old growth forest for all of us, for doing their part in mitigating the climate crisis. So for all of these things, it's a very comprehensive project that's lifting up women, lifting up Indigenous peoples and their traditional ways of life, protecting old growth forest and reforesting damaged lands.
All of these forests will become soon big one, and we want to really to have again bring new oxygen. Winds will be stopping winds, and it's really very, very, very important. Trees, they are life.
Okay, thank you so much. I remember all these women in the village when I was there. Was fantastic. You know, without trees in our remote area, you can't live, no life. Let me introduce a little bit about what we do, what Mama Shuja or Safeko mean is a synergy of Congolese women associations. That is our name in Congo. And we have what we call Hero Women Rising in Mama Shuja in Swahili. That is where I born and grown up. That is in forest, in Itombwe Forest. The Itombwe Forest is in South Kivu province, in Mwenga territory, in Itombwe sector. That's where Neema lives, and with all these beautiful women, how they do. My name is Neema Namadamu. I'm from DRC, Congo. And the Congo is a really big country, large country, second, I think, in African continent. Congo is in Middle Africa. And the Congo is the second rainforest after Amazon forest. That is the Congo. And also second one is very rich in minerals. And that's when the people digging minerals, mining companies, they cut trees, they put fires. And sometimes when they are cleaning minerals, the people, because we don't have running water, we go to source. And sometimes when they go so far, when they're digging minerals, and the animal and the human being go to source to bring that water, and it really is making people dying, have cholera, diarrhea, and all these diseases. Is that we really needed to planting trees, because when is the period of rain seasons, because there are no trees, because we don't have a toilet like you have a toilet here in America. Now, when people goes to toilet on a forest, and when it's raining, all those bad stuff goes in water. for a long way goes or those microbes, and is why people now in our area have really kind of diarrhea, cholera, bad stuff. And now when with this long way, when it was planting trees, have this crisis, COVID-19. That is a really big crisis in our area because we did having stop people bring food from other area, from neighbor countries, crossing the border with food. And now people begin be so hunger and kid malnutrition and old people. And now those will begin planting vegetables, tomato, onion, eggplant, all those carrots and the other things to fight with hunger, to fight with malnutrition. That is really big. And in this season, we are planting potato, we are planting soya and sorghum for fighting with malnutrition. That is where women do every day. And those trees, let me tell you, is medicine. That is where we live. And women who are pregnant with go to forest and have some planting, we know that is medicine. When they eat, they have energy, they have a blood. That is where we do. And also honey. You know honey? I think everyone knows the honey, but we do always have on the forest and the trees, we have honey, natural, organic. That is how we live in Itombwe. That is our life every day. Is why we're planting trees for building house, having light night, cooking with. When we don't have wood to cook with, we can't have a life. So without trees, no life in Itombwe. That is how life we live, and we are on the front line for climate change. Now we're talking about climate change. We're talking about women's rights. We will talk about human rights. We talk about natural rights. That is how now women who are on the front line fighting to get planting trees, to get space, to get every kind of livelihood. That is where I really grown up, and still today we have these women. Now I'm looking for again back to be with them. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to speak to you guys. I'm so happy. If you have another question, maybe we'll have a time to respond to your question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Neema, for the beautiful work. And, I just wanted to mention before I introduce Helena Gualinga, our next speaker, which I'm so honored she's here as well, is, we wanted to show this video and to have Neema speak because I think that when we're talking about intersectional feminism and gendered and racial impacts of what's happening with the climate crisis, we need to, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, look at how things are all connected. So we worked a long time together to strategize how could we lift up women in the Congo, which is one of the most violent regions in the world for women because of patriarchal societies and worldviews, and make sure that they are safe, bring them empowerment, face the climate crisis by, one, planting trees, which help the communities in all the ways that Neema beautifully articulated about their survival being deeply intertwined with being forest peoples. And at the same time, as we're planting trees, as you saw in the video, a percentage of them are specifically for human use for this ongoing way of life, of traditional ways of life for the people there. But a large percentage of them are going to reforest damaged lands that were already illegally logged in many cases, but to also reforest for climate mitigation. And while all this is going on, and we plant our own trees, this huge natural forest, this old growth forest of about 1.6 million acres is now being protected because we're planting our own trees. So it's a very integrated approach that lifts up the women, lifts up, understanding this value of having to have many solutions all be intertwined in one project. And I'm just so honored to be working with Neema. She's a force of nature herself. And so I just wanted to sort of highlight, some of that intersectional approach. And with that, I will be so glad to introduce Helena Gualinga, and we're going to open her comments also with a short video. This video that we're going to show is from a mutual colleague of ours. Her name is Sonia Guajajara from the Brazilian Amazon. As mentioned, Helena Gualinga is from the Ecuadorian Amazon, where we also work. But the fact is that the Indigenous women in the Amazon face very similar challenges in their own countries. They're faced with challenges being as women land defenders, forest land defenders, and they face extractive industries. So if we could show the last video we have for this session, Stand with Indigenous Peoples of Brazil and the Amazon and the Climate. We'll show the video and then welcome comments from Helena. Thank you.
E pirairá neraê, é o tupã. E pirairá nerazê, é o tupã. A conjuntura política brasileira é muito grave para toda a população, em especial para nós mulheres. E agora temos um presidente que acha que as mulheres têm que ter papel secundário, salários menores. Está aqui participando do Fórum Permanente da ONU, em frente à Embaixada do Brasil, para nós tem um significado muito forte. Porque é reafirmar a presença e a existência indígena em todos os espaços.
Brazil is the deadliest country in the world for environmental defenders. Since the election of Bolsonaro, there has been an increase in the killings of indigenous peoples in Brazil. These are their lands, their forests that they have maintained. So it is up to all of us to be protecting indigenous rights. That's the morally correct thing to do, to help our indigenous sisters and brothers when they're under attack, but also for all of us because of the climate. We need to protect the Amazon rainforest.
Bolsonaro, ainda parlamentar, ele falou que a cavalaria do Brasil era incompetente. Competente é a cavalaria norte-americana que conseguiu exterminar todos os indígenas. É muito urgente que o mundo escute a voz dos povos indígenas do Brasil. Nesse momento, órgão institucional, políticas públicas, pouco importa. Porque o que está nesse momento em pauta é exatamente a destruição, o extermínio e, mais uma vez, o genocídio coletivo de nossos povos. Eu não sei o resultado da nossa mobilização. Pode ser que na próxima semana vocês tenham notícias de várias lideranças nossas presas, criminalizadas ou mortas. Porque esse é o momento que a gente está. Mas nós vamos seguir firmes, resistindo, pagando com a própria vida. Porque para nós a luta pela Mãe Terra é a mãe de todas as lutas. É que são nossos territórios sagrados que garantem o ar, a água, né, o clima e que garante a vida no planeta. Nós precisamos urgentemente romper com esse modelo de desenvolvimento que usa de forma predatória a Mãe Terra. Estamos aqui para reafirmar que a luta pela Mãe Terra é a mãe de todas as lutas. Nova York pode até ser o centro do mundo, mas o que garante a vida no planeta é a Amazônia.
Thank you so much. And I present to you Helena Gualinga from the Ecuadorian Amazon. Please, Helena.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all for having me here. My name is Helena Gualinga. I'm 19 years old and I come from a small community called Sarayaku. of the Quechua people out in the Amazonian rainforest in Ecuador. From a very early age, I became aware of the threats that my home had. And because of this, I also started my work as an advocate for the Amazon and an advocate for my people, for the indigenous people of the Amazon. This all due to that I grew up in a community that, since the year I was born, actually had been fighting oil companies and an incredibly authoritarian regime. The year I was born, an oil company called CGC entered my community, backed up by the government, the military force, and all of this without my community's knowledge or consent. And this sparked a lot of fury, and it started a decade-long battle. During this time, the women of my community, the people of my community, the leaders were persecuted. We were called, on national media, we were called eco-terrorists because we protected our lands. And first it actually began with people just going out to the forest, going from our communities out in the forest to protect with their own bodies our communities, making sure that the military didn't come into our communities. But after a couple of years, when that didn't give any other results, they kept coming back. The people of my community had to take to other methods, such as going to the courthouses, meeting with officials, and finally, after a few years, we were able to take the case to an international court, because the judicial system in Ecuador didn't work in our favor. There was nothing that guaranteed us that there would be justice within the system, because, well, first of all, they didn't even accept the case. So when we took our case to the international court, 10 years after the atrocities began, we were actually able to win this lawsuit against the Ecuadorian government for violating our rights, for coming into our territory and community without our consent, and trying to destroy our home. And I think it's important to start off with this story that my community has, because we need to remember that there are victories. And because of the victory that Sarayaku, now my community, had almost 10 years ago today, we left a legal president for all indigenous people in Ecuador, and not just only in Ecuador, but in Latin America. And we can see how other communities have been able to have similar victories as ours because of this case, because we took this to an international instance. And then we can later see how this impacts other communities that now, 5 years later, have been going through the same struggles. Of course, this does not mean that my community is safe. That is absolutely not what it means. We still have constant threats against us as an indigenous and as an Amazonian community with natural resources on our lands. But we're not the only ones. Even though we have this extra layer of protection, all the other neighbor communities still have to go through the same fight that we did 10 years ago. And it's important to understand that this victory was only possible due to a lot of different strategies. It was years and years and years of work, of people literally putting their own bodies on the front lines. It was finding allies on the outside, not just on the outside our community, but outside Ecuador. It was finding people that understood what was happening and had the ability to help when the system here was not helping us. But it shouldn't really be like this. We shouldn't have to put our bodies on the front lines. That shouldn't be the ultimatum. That shouldn't be the way to protect the Amazon. So to protect the Amazon, we need to understand the relationship between the people that live there and the rainforest. And I think it's just become more and more evident that protecting its people is the most efficient way to protect the Amazon. We can see just in the province where I'm in right now, in Pastaza, most untouched forest. I think over 90% of untouched forest just in this province is on indigenous lands. If that gives you an idea of what indigenous people actually are protecting, how much Amazon we actually are protecting. And this is on a very small scale just in the province, and on a wider level it's even more. But the Amazon, it's not only rich in culture and people, but we have all kinds of natural resources. It's one of the most important ecosystems on the planet. As we were seeing on the video, the role it plays in climate mitigation as a carbon sink is vital to curb climate change. It's estimated that the Amazon possesses about 20% of the world's fresh water, which we know that with the water crisis being getting worse and worse, it will be something super, super important in the future. And imagine the Amazon only covers about 3 or 4% of the Earth's surface. And when it comes to indigenous people, we are about 5% of the population, but we are protecting about 80% of the world's biodiversity. And these numbers that I'm telling you, this is me speaking your language, but what we call it in my language, it's called Kausaksacha, which means the living forest. All these numbers that I just told you that we can find on different documents, this is something that we live and that we see every day in our communities. So what Kausaksacha means, which is this vision of my community, which means the living forest, is actually what we translated from the stories and from the teachings that our elders used to tell us when we were smaller. So to understand why the rainforest and the Amazon is so important to us, we started exploring what it actually means to us, and how is it that we view the world, and how do we view the Amazon. And one of the most important things that our elders teach us is that we are not something that is opposite to nature, or something that is they teach us that we are a part of nature, and not only that we are a part of nature, but as we are living, the forest is also living. So all the waters, all the trees, the mountains, the waterfalls, they all have its own being, and that's why we also need to protect each other. So how we see it is that we're able to live in balance, and we're able to live in harmony with the natural world, because we are able to understand this, because we're able to see this connection, because we're able to see the forest as something that is living. And that is just to understand the deep relationship that indigenous people have with what surrounds us. But I was saying earlier, to protect the Amazon means to protect its people. But what does protecting its people really mean today? Because we have something as, I'd say, simple but sacred as protecting our lives. We were seeing in the video how our lives are constantly threatened by big industries and our governments in our countries. But there's also so much more we can do. We need to make sure that we can protect ourselves first, and we need to make sure that Indigenous people that protect the Amazon, that we are equipped, that we have the tools to keep defending our territories. In the reality that we live today, it is almost impossible to be able to balance the life you lead in your community and to, for example, be a protector of your community. Many of the protectors that are from our communities need to leave their families because they need to go outside and work to make sure that people do not come into our territories. We need to make sure that the people that are in the communities, that are living on the lands, they can continue growing on their lands, they can continue live off the forest, and still be able to protect our territories. And I think something that, especially here in my country, is not very discussed, but I think this is a great space to talk about it, is exactly the importance and the role that women have. Because women are the ones that are most affected by climate change. We are the ones that are most affected by the extractive industries. But we are also the ones that have been the pillars of the fights that we have been leading, and within our own societies that is not visibilized. But me coming from a community, me coming from an entire society of Indigenous people in Ecuador, know the important role that women have played in the fight to protect the Amazon. And I, as a young woman myself, I'm seeing the struggle that women my age have, that young women and girls have, and not just in my country, but in my community, within the Indigenous population. And I think it's so important that we're able to give women and young women the tools to be able to take these leadership roles, to make sure that women are the ones not just doing and being the pillars of the fight and working, but also taking the lead in what is protecting their territories and making sure that they actually have a seat at the table when it comes to deciding what happens to our territories, what happens not just to our territories but our own bodies, how we protect our communities and how we protect our territories.
Thank you. Thank you, Helena. I just wanted to, I know that we're coming to the close of our session. Thank you so much for your incredible words, and it's such an honor to work with you. And just really appreciate your community and all the hard work. And we're really excited to be launching this year with Helena, a young women advocate formation that we are going to be, developing over this coming year and into the years to come. Because we have been talking a lot about the power of women, as Helena was just saying, but also the importance of young women in the communities in the Ecuadorian Amazon. So we're really excited about that and getting ready. Right now, we were looking in the chat and I see the people asking about going to the UN climate talks. We're actually going to be bringing a delegation of frontline women to the climate talks, as we do every year, so that they can advocate for themselves, as we talked about. I know we don't have very much more time in this session, so if people have any questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat and we'll try to answer some of your questions. And while I look for your questions there, I also am very honored that, and Sine, thank you very much, dropped into the chat that WeCan is hosting a very large 6-day global women's assembly for climate justice that is starting this Saturday and runs for 6 days. For 5 hours a day online. And there's going to be 100 leaders from 40 countries. And everyone is welcome to join us. You can go to wecaninternational.org to learn about that. But just to say, this is an ongoing deep conversation. Again, I'm just looking in the chat to see if there's any other questions. And one thing I did want to mention is we're very involved in something, in case people are interested, called the Escazú Agreement, which is new legislation that we've been advocating for quite some time, many years in the Latin American region, that is specifically to protect the environment, but also environmental land defenders. And we're specifically working with Helena and other women from Latin America so that they have more rights to protect themselves, because we're seeing not only in Latin America, but all over the world, as Neema was saying, as land defenders stand up, they're also under attack. And we need to particularly protect the women who are doing this work. So let me go back to Kari, and then Neema, and then Helena, and just give you all the last word before we close out our section. We only have a few minutes, so they've got to be a little short, something maybe before we close. And we wanted to thank everyone for joining us for this really important session on the gendered and racial impacts of the climate crisis, but also hearing from all these different amazing women about the solutions that they have. And earlier from my opening comments about food sovereignty and food security, protecting forests, protecting seeds, leading water protection around the world. I mean, the statistics around women leading climate solutions is really vast, and we don't have time to go into those. I would just encourage you to go to our website, where we have a whole page on why women, where you can learn for yourselves, not just that it's morally right that women are leading the way, but factually we are, and we need to really lift up women's voices because they're being undervalued and underrepresented when they're the backbone of these movements. So Kari, do you want to chime in your voice for a minute before we close out?
Yes, I would just like to thank everyone for coming, and also thanking all the speakers for their wonderful, powerful words. And I would like to also thank, the Creator today for waking all of us and for getting us together. And for the Osquani, the tree people, we believe everything has a spirit and we are all connected. And so, Ganachish, thank you for your guys' kind words, and thank you for listening to all of us.
Thank you so much, Kari. And for those of you who may be just tuning in, that's Kari calling in from the island of Huna in the middle of the Tongass rainforest. Neema, would you like to have a final word?
Yes, thank you so much, everyone, and thank you, because women are doing much work, and where I can say we have only one planet, and we're supposed everyone to protect. And when you protect the trees, we protect the human being, you protect the women. Thank you so much, and we'll talk to you soon again. We are together.
Thank you, Neema. Helena, would you like a final word, and thank you?
Yeah, thank you all for being here. And just to mention that because of us seeing how important it is to empower young women, that's what we're gonna be working on also with Weekend, which is really exciting for me to be able to give back to my community as well. But yeah, thank you all for listening, and I appreciate you taking your time.
So let me just thank everyone again, Kari Ames, Neema Namadamu, Helena Gualinga. I'm Osprey, Orielle with the Women's Earth and Climate Action Network. Thank you for tuning into our session, and we hope that you have a wonderful conference. We feel really honored to have been invited. We managed to navigate the technology just barely, but we're here with you. We made it. And again, if anyone has any questions, I think we have like 1 more minute. I'm looking to see if anyone else has any comments, but we'd love to carry on our conversation with you, and hope all of you have really good best wishes for the work you're doing. I know there's a lot of leaders on the call doing amazing work in your communities and in your organizations, and together as women, we can make the change we need to, and we don't have that much time. So whatever we're going to do, it's time to do it now, and it's time to do it together. So thank you very, very much. And I guess we will close out that session now. Thank you, everyone. Really
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.